some bloke, Hearn. I've sort of looked up and he's in the seats, right? You are a promoter. Yeah. And I'm like, oh.
Eddie, welcome to Sardinia Island. Welcome to Abu Dhabi. Great to see you, my friend. You're smiling. You're a bit jet lagged, I believe, but great to be here.
Yeah, good to see you boys off Zoom.
Yes.
You know, it's been a good few weeks. Bit tired this way. You know, normally I go the other way to the West Coast and East Coast, but really excited. You know, the start of something really big here is a great buzz, and you learn as you go. You know, in this region, and we've been working hard. There's a lot of anticipation. Honestly, one of the best fight cards we've ever put together. I love the vision that the DCT have here, and you know, really excited to effectively launch boxing here in Abu Dhabi and start big things to come.
I want to talk to you if I can, Eddie, because we talk often. Barack Obama, Maggie Thatcher, they operate on 4 hours a night, or at least Maggie did. Barack still does. 4 hours a night. You are prolific. We were just talking off air. You're here, there, and everywhere. Where do you find the time? How much sleep does Eddie Hearn actually get?
Like, I've just learned to get it when you can, rather than sort of, you know, I think this whole thing about 8 hours, 9 hours, you know, I think that's impossible really on the time zone. So it's like 2 here, maybe 20 minutes here. And if you add it all up, it might come to that amount. But we have a great team, you know, of people. And, you know, Frank Smith, who's been a huge part of putting this relationship together with the DCT, and Sean Palmer and Kevin Rooney and Ross Garrett. Like there's dozens of them around the world. And they've kind of, I'm just the guy they roll out now. You know, I'm a bit robotic where they sort of say, right, Eddie, there's a press conference, you've got to be there at 2:00, and I just turn up and they say, right, here's your schedule. And I'm terrible. My biggest weakness is my organisation, because I don't have diaries really and laptops and stuff like this. I just have a big mouth, right? But they just roll me out. So I'll just turn up and like literally like the morning I'll wake up and my PA will say to me, here's your schedule. And it will just be interviews. And I don't know how we kind of got to this level or this stage, but I don't really have any organisation of what I'm doing. I don't have any notes. You know, people say to me about the press conferences and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. It's a bit of a weird skill because I'm not actually very talented. You know, I'm not like intellectually smart or anything like that. But I think it must be a passion for what I do, that I can sit down at a press conference and I don't know what I'm going to say. You know, I think that's a weakness as well. I think sometimes I should say, right, you're going to say this. And sometimes when you do a show like this, there's a lot of people to thank, and I will do some research, you know, to get names right and stuff like that. But ultimately it's just like, go. And I go, you know, for half an hour talking about the whole card, every fighter on the card, their record. It's almost a bit like Rain Man. You've ever seen that film? You know, where he sort of goes in and it flows. So, yeah, I'm probably a disaster for those guys because they think, where is he? What's he going to say? But I'll just turn up on time and, you know, and then they wheel me off to the next one. So that's sort of how I've become. But they're the sort of heroes, really, because they're the engine room. And although I guess I'm the face and the mouth, it just works well. And, you know, it's a passion for what you do at the end of the day. Going back to the original question, you always get tired, you know, but also we have to remember how lucky we are. I mean, we're lucky to be alive, let alone doing what we love. How many people are out in jobs where they don't do what they love? I love boxing. It's been a part of my life since I was 8 years old. So to be around it, the ups and downs, that some days you have good weeks and bad weeks. It's been a rough couple of weeks, really, you know, but it's life. You know, you have good days, you have bad days. Doesn't matter what you do.
On your dad's competitiveness and sporting passion, of course, and your own amateur boxing career, Eddie, I got to ask about this fight you had with him when you were 16 that he said was the best loss he ever took. And also your own kind of introduction to your amateur career. I think they got your name wrong or something in Dagenham.
I think I was about 13 and I was at Billericay Amateur Boxing Club. That was my local club. And I just thought, you know, I was hanging around with Nazim Hamed and Eubank and Lennox Lewis, and I thought I could really fight, you know. And I was like a beanpole. And I'd say dreadful, but I was pretty limited. Like I was, you know, you go down, even Billericay, there's a lot of kids that were, you know, every kid in there was a lot tougher than me, right? They might not have had shorts and boots as nice as me, but they were a lot tougher than me. And I started boxing down Billericay. And back then, before you get carded, you would take part in gym bouts. So you would travel, or another club would travel to your club, and you'd all arrive and you'd all get weighed and they'd just match you up. So my first one of those was at Dagenham, which is actually where my dad's from. And they had like carpet tiles on the floor in the ring, and it was quite like, certainly not dangerous or scary, but quite lively. Like if you imagine, you know, the kids' parents are there, and like it's a local Dagenham, you know, and so they said, you're fighting that kid over there. So I looked at him and I thought, I reckon I can have him, you know. And he was like, so I went over. I mean, this is another reason where like I could never be a boxer. So I'm thinking, I think I'm going to go and have a chat with him, right? I mean, why would you do that? Like, I thought it would be a good idea for mind games. So I went over to him and I said, all right, mate. I said, I'm fighting you. He's like, oh, mate, nice one. I was like, how many bouts you had? And he went, like, 40. And I went, and he went, what about you? I was like, oh, I said 16, saying like that. Yeah. And I went back and went, oh, I went over to my dad and went, he's had 40 bouts. And he went, oh, don't worry, son, you'll be fine. So it's funny looking back now because it's so cringe. You know, I had Billericay colours were blue, and I went down to Charlie Magri's shop in Bethnal Green, which was a really famous boxing shop, and I bought like these blue title shorts, so like satin, you know, really bright, and a pair of Lonsdale boots. And people must have been looking at me thinking, look, like
all the gear,
like,
no
you know,
idea.
Yeah, full kit. Won't say the other word that comes, but like, you know,
Yeah.
and like this blue vest, and then they, you know, get in the ring, and it's packed, and I had Jim McDonnell, who was one of my dad's boxers at the time. My dad was filming it on a camcorder. Good for me. We don't know where the tape had gone because it was just in this little cassette thing that you used to sort of put into this other massive camcorder. And they said, and in the blue corner from Billericay, and I thought, like, this is my moment, Eddie Hills. And I was like, oh my God, I got my name wrong. I can't believe it. Anyway, went out. And the great thing about gym bouts is, because they're trying to encourage kids, they don't actually give a winner. So you do 3 rounds. But obviously I told everyone that I won because I did win, you know.
Yeah, of course.
But it was a decent fight. Anyway, came out of there, and in the car home, I said to my dad, I can't believe it, you know. Eddie Hills, like they messed up my name. He went, no, I told him not to call you Hearn because you would have got a pasting. I was like, so he told Billericay Boxing Club, don't introduce him as Hearn because they'll want to kill him. So just introduce him as something else. So Hills is what they come up with, and some boxing fans still call me that, like taking the mick. Oh, here he is, Eddie Hills. But, you know. But the fight with him, people really, especially parents today, they really don't understand, you know, the logic behind that. And that was always like, again, going back to, you only win when you deserve to win. So growing up, he said to me, look, when you get to 18, because he used to box a little bit, he was useless as well, but I'm going to take you to the gym and I'm going to give you a hiding, right? And that's going to be like, you're a man now, so welcome. And, you know,
good luck.
Yeah. And this is where I come from.
Welcome to a lifetime full of hidings.
Yeah, but this is where I come from, and I'm going to show you what it's like to come from where I come from because you're soft kind of thing. And, you know, so I'm like, all right, and I just, you know, okay, I sort of looked forward to that day growing up, really. But then when I started boxing at 13 and 14, got to 16 and I was like nearly 6 foot and I was sort of starting to fill out a little bit. And he was like, I think we're going to bring it forward. So do you want to do it like Saturday? You know, yeah. So I was like, okay, yeah. So we went down to the gym in Romford, with which he owned, which was a gym. There's a few fighters in there. And we put the gloves on, quite small gloves as well. And he said, we're going to do like 3 2-minute rounds. So I was like, okay. So the bell went. I just remember him coming out and like the look on his face. Like when I tell this story, people do, especially if you're in a different kind of world, people are like, you know, and he was like letting them fly around my head, you know, and I was like, you know, defending. I caught a few, couple on the chin, and he started to get really tired, you know. And then in the second round, I just hit him to the body and he went down and he was like, oh, and he got up and then I went over and sort of bashed him up and hit him again to the body and it was over. And he was like when he says his greatest defeat, he was so happy, like he couldn't stop phoning people to tell them. And the next day in the paper, it was Hearn's son, KO, 16-year-old Eddie. He started phoning the journalists going, my son knocked me out. Oh, it was unbelievable. He whacked me to the bottom. I was pounding him in the first round. And he came back and it was like, I guess it was just like the badge of honour for him to say, because he said to me that when he was young, his mum, my grandmother, she used to clean houses. And he said it sort of used to burn him inside that she had to clean the houses of successful people. And he would always look at those houses and sort of, one, want to have one when he was older, but two, almost like have a little bit of disdain for the people who lived there because they were like, and he said, I was really worried that you were going to be one of those people, because at school there were some kids that had money and I just hated them. For some reason, it's a character flaw really, but he said, no, I just was petrified that you'd be that kid that I hated growing up. So well done, son, well done, and it was a weird upbringing really, but
your father, I mean, it's clear as day listening to you, great respect from great love for him. In terms of everything that he has taught you, Eddie, the best piece of advice, and we were talking on the car on the way down about, getting sales tips from you. It's well documented. You sold windows, for goodness sake, at 15. You're now one of, and I don't just say this because you're sat in front of us, you're now one of the biggest kingpins in boxing. In terms of the best piece of advice your father gave you, and you've said yourself you don't think of yourself as the smartest, therefore give us the sales guide to success for Eddie Hearn.
I think sales is a transfer of emotions, right? So to be a great salesman, you have to believe in your product and you have to believe in what you're selling. Because I can sell anything, but if I believe in what I'm selling, then you're buying, and that transcends across all products. If you're selling photocopiers up and down the country, if in the boot of your van, you've got a machine that really isn't great, the ink runs dry quite quickly, when you load up the paper, it doesn't flow very well through the trays, and sometimes it can just get a little bit sticky on the way, and you're in there and you're flogging. But if you've got a wonderful machine in the car that never goes wrong, it's economic on the ink. You can load up that tray and it just flows out beautifully out there. I mean, that like for me,
I want to buy one now. Have you got one?
But everything's storytelling, right? And this is what I do in sport, because we're telling stories, but we're telling true stories about journeys of fighters, aspirations of fighters, the moment of combat, that moment of glory. And every fighter has an incredible story. So it's my job to get you emotionally invested in what I'm doing. And that is a product. Could be a fight. Could be a World Darts Championships. Could be the snooker championships at the Crucible. But you have to, it's like I said, it's that transfer of emotion where you buy in to what I'm saying. So if you need a photocopier and all of a sudden you realise this is the photocopier I need, you're in. Same with a car, same with a house. I just do it for events. But again, it comes down to, and sometimes you may not see the difference when I'm selling an average show versus a great show, but I do. I feel it inside. It's just one flows and one is a bit of an effort. It's why this show genuinely, like I could talk about it all day. Like I can stand up on any platform proud to say this is a cracker. So in terms of sales, that's really the key, is to speak with passion and speak with intent, because there's a difference between blagging and selling. I can blag anything, but when you're selling, when you're actually in that moment of having a great product, and that's what our business has been about, building great products and great events. So in terms of advice he's given me, lots of different advice. I mean, he's the king of simplicity, right? If you've ever got a problem, you sit down with my dad, you could feel like your world is about to implode, and he'll just sit down and go, right, listen, this is what we're going to do. Bomb, bomb, bomb. And you go, right, okay. And you're back. And that's, keeping it. And I always live by the mantra of simplicity, because we're in an era of overthinking, right? Where, people are, we're talking about mental health, and that's all real. but it's always been there. You know, it's not that, it's just we're talking about it more now, but it's how it's being handled, you know, and simplicity is key. For me, I always find like if you're losing a bit of direction or you're struggling a little bit, keep it simple. You know, write down some mornings, Frank and those guys, they take the mickey out of me because I've just got notepads. Right? I use notepads. I don't use laptops. I use my phone and a notepad. And I write things down. And if I'm just sort of straying a little bit, I'm losing a bit of focus, I'll just say, right, today. And I'll write down 10 things that I'm going to do today. And they could be menial. They could be putting petrol in the car, walking the dog, you know, stopping at Tesco's on the way home to get something. But it's just like all of a sudden it just brings you back into focus, sort of brings you your alignment back. And there's too many people these days, you see it, you know, social media, whether it's David Goggins or whether it's Steve or Harvey, you know, all these guys are brilliant. But it's like, we live in a world of bluster and so many people have got medium and long-term goals and strategies. They're all a complete waste of time because no one's prepared to take care of the short-term problems. Yeah. And that's the period that's most important when you're working on anything. You know, when we came to Abu Dhabi, we were talking about, we want to do, you know, we want a long-term vision in the Middle East and that's the dream. But what about all the nuts and bolts to take care of what we got to do for November 5th and everything that comes around it? And once you overcome that and you deliver a successful event, then everything else can go. Don't focus on down the road. Focus on this, on the moment now. So, yeah, he's taught me loads. I mean, in sales, he would always say to me, always leave a little bit of bread in the fish's mouth, right? And I can hear him saying that. and what that means really is always give value. Don't be greedy. And that's something that sort of, as a business, he's always relied, you know, we're not looking, and again, same here with this region. Don't come in and just, you know, try and, you know, be aggressive, be greedy, take liberties. Come in, deliver value, and everything else will flow off it. You deliver value, you build partnerships, you will grow from there. And always leave a little bit of bread in the fish's mouth. He says it all the time. And that's key. And if you think about it, that's right. Always leave people walk away thinking, we got value. That applies to a partner out here, that applies to a customer. You know, and that's where you build relationships with customers as well. I want people to leave our events and shows and say, wow, I got value for money. Yeah. I'm going back. And that brand, that trust, that loyalty transcends globally. And we never get the credit really for what we've done globally because we are the only global promotional company in boxing, the only one. And every week we're in a different territory, right? And the brand that we've built is now establishing that trust and loyalty worldwide with fight fans that when we turn up, you're not always talent driven. Talent will always be key. The fights that you do will always be the driver. But now we're going into markets and people are saying, Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, we know them, we've seen their work, we're going to go. And it's the same as the UFC. But UFC have, you know, that they're on, that's where we aspire to be. But the UFC have built a business and a brand that relies on quality and entertainment and value for money. So when they come here or when they go to any city in anywhere around the world, particularly in Europe, it's UFC. We're buying because of that brand recognition and that trust with the consumer.
And Eddie, you've built up that reputation, you've built up that trust with so many partners, but take us back to the first ever major fight that you promoted. How that came about and you decided it was time to step into that world. How you got people to take you seriously when it was your very first one. And then, of course, how things maybe didn't initially quite go to plan.
Yeah, that was really, I was doing, you know, when I left college at 18, I was going to go to university, but I wanted to work. I wanted to make money. That was the key for me. And the last thing I ever wanted to do was work for my dad. Because growing up, everyone went, well, you're all right. You're just going to work for your dad. I was thinking, you're never going to get any credit at all, really, because you're going to go straight working for your dad and then, you know, but that's what I was always destined to do. But so I wanted to go and get a job in sports marketing and athlete representation because that's what I wanted to do. It was around, I think Jerry Maguire was around that time and I think I was probably sort of...
Show me.
Yeah, exactly. I thought this is a bit of me. And I wrote to all these big, huge firms in London and I went to one called BDS Sponsorship. And I remember sitting down with the guy, Richard Busby, and I was 18, and it was in Covent Garden because my dad's office was in Romford. in Essex. And I thought, I don't want to work in Romford. I want to be in Covent Garden or something like that. So I went for an interview and he said to me, can I ask you a question? I was like, yeah. He said, are you related to Barry Hearn? And I'm like, yes, my dad. He went, what are you doing here? That was a much smaller company. I said, I just don't, I don't want to go and work for him. I want to, and he was a bit sort of, but anyway, I got the job and I was there for 2 or 3 years. And then I remember getting a phone call. I went from sort of junior. I used to just input contacts into a database of people you needed to talk to discuss sponsorship with. This company had some huge accounts, for major sponsorship deals. But it was my job. It was like going back to my telesales day where I'd phone up a company and say, could I ask you who the best person to speak to about sponsorship is? But I always felt like I should be selling that sponsorship, right? But where I was 18, so anyway, sort of writing Joe Blogs, marketing director, Cadbury's, blah, blah, blah. That was about 6 months. And Richard Busby was just, and I'd sit here on a desk and Richard Busby's desk was there. And every now and again, and I don't mind saying it because just in case he watches, and he'd sort of have his phone here and he'd pick up his coffee mug and he'd go back to me, with his coffee mug. And I'd go, thanks, Richard. And I'd just go into the kitchen and make him a coffee. Come back, there you go, mate. Thinking, and then after a while, I started to sell sponsorship there. And I was in the sales department. And one day, the phone rang and we were in like this annex upstairs. And it was a phone call and I picked it up and they said, hi, can we speak to the head of sponsorship sales there? Well, he was out. So I just said, it's me really. Pretty much. I mean, I was the best there. I wasn't technically the head, but it doesn't matter. So I said, yeah, hello, it's me. And they said, well, would you be interested to come to apply for this job at LEA Events, which was quite a big events company? And I was like, yeah, can I ask what the package is? And I was on about, say, like £20,000 at the time. I'd been at BDS about 2 or 3 years, something like that. I think I started on £10,000 or £12,000 a year. And they said, it's £33,000 a year plus bonus and benefits. I thought, benefits? Oh, sounds good. I had no idea what it was. So I was like, yeah, I'd be interested. They said, well, have you got a personal email address? I said, yeah, so-and-so, so-and-so. Anyway, next day, sent me an email. So I rocked up at LEA Events and it was Duncan Goodhue. Do you remember the swimmer? Right. Yes. So he was the director of the company. And we sat down and there was about 20 odd applicants and did the first interview. And they said, phoned me and said, we'd like you to come back. We're down to like 6. I was like, blimey. And I was watching all these people come out. They were like 40, and I was 19, 20, something like that. And then when they called me up after the second interview and they said, listen, we really like you, but we have to be honest, like we didn't expect to be looking to give the job to someone who was 20. So I was like, oh yeah, don't worry, I'm ready for this. I've been around it all my life, blah, 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 blah. I've got more energy than these other people. I've got no commitments, no kids. I'm ready to go. And they said, well, the only issue is we think that the package is quite a lot of money for someone who's 20. So I was like, well, you pay for what you get, don't you? So I said, would you be willing to accept 30? I was like, yeah, that's absolutely fine. So I got the job there. And I worked for Eddie. I worked for Duncan Goodhue for a couple of years. And we were representing athletes there, like Ian Botham, you remember the cricketer like him, and golfers on the European tour.
Yeah.
And then after a couple of years there, I just felt like, look, I had the relationship with the golfers. I knew everything that I was doing. I wanted to do something on my own. So I set up Matchroom Golf. And I took those golfers into our management company, went on to the PGA Tour in America, sort of spent a lot of time in America representing golfers out there, and did that for 3 or 4 years, literally flying backwards and forwards to America and Europe and like being on tour with the golf. Then I started to play a little bit of poker online, right? And I loved the game. And I started to see the emergence. We had one poker tournament called Poker Million, which my dad started years ago because he loved poker. And I started to see small bits of poker on television. So I thought, I think we should start creating big poker tournaments on TV. And if you think back to 15 years ago, it was everywhere. And we were doing it all. It was a massive turning point for our business. We started making a lot of money, and we basically produced all the major televised online poker events. And it was brilliant because the characters in poker were just, it was a bit like boxing, really. But it talked about narrative and building a show. And
Doyle Brunson and all those guys.
Them, Phil Hellmuth, Tom Dwan, Phil Ivey, Devilfish, God bless his soul, and they were amazing characters. And I did that for years, and it was a huge success. Anyway, I went to play the World Series of Poker in Las Vegas and sat down at a table, and Audley Harrison was there. Now, Audley Harrison was Olympic gold medalist, heavyweight, very well known in the UK, hadn't really done it as a pro boxer, and was now struggling. So I sat down with him at the table, and we weren't doing any boxing other than a tournament called Prize Fighter, which was a bit of fun. It was like one night sort of stuff, where you had 8 guys, quarterfinals, semi-finals, final on one night. So I sat down with Audley, and I was like, Audley Harrison, I remember him, I'm still a boxing fan. And he was like, hey, yeah. He said, are you guys doing any boxing at Matchroom? And I said, nah, not really. I said, it's dead boxing. He said, look, I'm looking for a way back. And I thought, God, he'd be great in a Prize Fighter. But he'd never do it because Prize Fighter was just guys that are like desperate for, it's like almost like unlicensed boxing, And I said, you know what you should do? I said, you should go in Prize Fighter. I said, and if you win Prize Fighter, I'll get you a shot at the European title. And then when you win there, you can fight David Hay for the world heavyweight title. Now, bearing in mind, at this point, this guy was like down, he was like looking for any kind of opportunity. He was like, you think you can deliver that? And I'm like, yeah, 100%. And he's like, can you take my number? I was like, yeah, no problem. So my dad hated Audley Harrison. Not hated, but he hated Audley Harrison wanted to manage and promote his own career, which my dad really liked. If you're a fighter, you're a fighter. If you're a promoter, you're a promoter. So I phoned my dad. I literally walked out the table and said, I've just spoke to Audley Harrison. Oh, Audley Harrison. What does he want? I said, well, he's asking if we can help him in boxing. No chance. He's useless. He's this, he's that. I said, yeah, but if he goes in Prize Fighter, he's still a big name. We do a heavyweight Prize Fighter. He wins that. I said, there's Michael Sprott for the European title and David Hay. He went, mate, you're on your own. He said, I ain't getting involved with him. So I was like, all right. So anyway, Audley didn't want to do Prize Fighter, but I talked him into it. And we did a heavyweight Prize Fighter at London XL where we sold 5,000 or 6,000 tickets. Normally we'd sell 800 at York Hall. And it was a huge success. And he won it. And everyone's now saying, wow, Audley's back. And all of a sudden I'm in the ring with him. Not even really got a promoter's license. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I like the photo, So I get in the ring and he goes, that's the first one. Now the European title. And I'm like, oh.
He's
shit.
Remembered,
oh, how do I do that one? So then I went away, spoke to Michael Sprott. We did the fight at Alexandra Palace for the European title. And then we had 5,000 or 6,000 there. And Audley Harrison injured his pec in the second round. He lost every round of the fight. And with about a minute to go in the fight, I just remember thinking, and by then I'd started the conversations with David Hay and Adam Booth. They thought, who's this kid? But I said, look, Audley Harrison, you should fight him for the world heavyweight title. He was still perceived to be a bit of a joke. And they were like, but David Hay was smart, and so was Adam Booth. And they thought, all British fight, let's see what happens in the Sprott fight. Anyway, loses every round. Minute to go. I'm sort of sitting there. And I remember I was wearing this terrible suit. Like it was like tin foil. I was like dressing up for the night. Again, not having a clue what I was doing. And my dad just looked at me and said, listen, don't worry, son. I said, you know what? I said, if he would have won this fight, I honestly think we could have got him in the World Heavyweight Championship.
You're saying that as the fight's going on?
Yeah, there's a minute to go. He's lost every round. My dad said to him, look, take it on the chin. He said, when the fight's over, he said, get in the ring, commiserate Audley. I'll get in, congratulate Michael Sprott, and we just, we move on. And I went, I ain't getting in the ring. I said, I can't believe it. Gave him a chance of a lifetime and he's lost every round. He's like, stop being a sulker, get in there after. So I was like, all right. Looked up, Audley Harrison has unleashed a left hook from his boots and knocked Michael Sprott clean out in the last round of this fight, right? Like this in front of me. I'm straight in the ring. I knew you'd do it. I never doubted you for a minute. He's like, and Audley was the most amazing talker. He's like, I told him, God, he gave me my injury, but I knew if it was the last second of this fight, I would win. I was like, I felt the same, just down there, And then all of a sudden, like, the place has gone nuts, and then he's gone to me, the world heavyweight title, and I'm like, oh no, I've got to do that one now. And like, to be fair to Audley knew the business much better than me. And we both flew out to Las Vegas the next week to meet David Haye and Adam Booth. And next thing, we're negotiating a contract. I'm reading a contract for the world heavyweight title, which I have very little idea of what is in this contract. But Audley was almost like educating me as we go because he'd done it before. Anyway, a week later, I think it was about a £2 million purse, of which we were on like 15% at the time. We haven't made money from boxing from years. My dad was thinking, wow, this is all right. And then it was on. We'd signed the fight. Next thing, I was everywhere. And I remember at that press conference, talk about now, me
This is
going
2011, right?
Yeah. I had to sit on my hands because they were shaking so much, So I'd pick up a mic and I was giving it, sort of looking down at David Haye, and I was saying to him, you're overrated. You can punch, but you got no chin, and this guy's going to knock you out, and blah blah blah. And everyone, like the media, were loving it, thinking, who is this
upstart
kid? Like they knew I was Barry Hearn's son, but he's really going for it. And as I was sort of shouting to David Haye, I could feel. So I was like, in the end, I was like, yeah, and I'm thinking, I can't do the other hand. I kept sort of swapping hands and stuff like that. Anyway, the build-up, it was massive. Like, Audley was brilliant. David Haye is a great self-promoter. You got me now out of nowhere. And then the fight comes around, and I'm like, Audley was amazing at getting you to believe. And I was so naive, but I was like, there is no way this guy cannot win. Even my dad, I heard him on the phone telling people, Audley Harrison's going to be the new heavyweight world champion. Because he just spoke so well. And the night before the fight, we're in this Marriott outside of Manchester. And he had all his friends and family there. And he stood up and he was like, when I got in trouble as a kid, I said I wanted to get an education. And they told me, you got no chance. I went out, I got first degree honours in business, blah, blah, blah. Then at an old age, I wanted to turn to amateur boxing. And I said I was going to become Olympic champion. And I went out and I won Olympic gold. And when I turned pro, I told them I'll become world heavyweight champion. And tomorrow night, with you as my friends and team, we shall become world heavyweight champion. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, I'm just like, Audley, I can't believe this. I'm thinking, I am going to promote the world heavyweight champion. This is unbelievable. Change room before the fight, we're all huddling round, a few prayers and stuff like that. He walks out to Phil Collins, In the Air Tonight, I can see it come. I'm in the ring at this moment, just watching him thinking, I cannot believe that, it could be 3 minutes, could be 36 minutes, but we are about to make history here tonight. And he got in the ring, he had like this hat on, massive, 6'6". I thought, oh, yes. And then all of a sudden I turned around and David Haye come out to Ain't No Stopping Us Now, And he walked out, he stood on the apron like this. Yeah. And then he looked at Audley Harrison and I just saw Audley's Adam's apple just go like this. And I went, oh, I'm not as confident now. Anyway, got out of the ring, sat with my dad. He went, what do you think? I went, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. He looks a bit nervous now. Anyway, he didn't throw a punch in the fight, right? Neither of them did. And it got to the third round and everyone was like, what is he doing? And eventually David Haye just thought, what are you doing? And just walked straight up to him and chinned him and like a flurry of punches, it was all over. Anyway, the whole arena is going nuts, booing. Yeah. Right, all my friends had come up, bought tickets. They're shouting at me, Eddie, what's that? What's that? Oh, he's rubbish. I'm like, what? Anyway, got into the ring, ushered Audley out. People are throwing stuff, like screaming abuse at him and everyone, we're like this, going back to the change room. And as we've just gone into the tunnel at the MENs, some bloke, Hearn, And I've sort of looked up, and he's in the seats, right? You are a promoter, yeah. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. Anyway, went back into the change rooms, and I'm like, the media want to get in to talk to Aldy because he talked it up so much. This was the problem, and so had I.
Yeah.
So I got in the change room, and I was like, and he was just sort of sitting there, and I went over to him. I went, what happened? And he went, oh, I knew he was waiting for me to throw a punch, and if I threw one, he was going to throw one back. I was like, I swear that's actually what happens. Anyway, so it's like, and I'm thinking, oh my God. Anyway, Aldy goes, I said to Aldy, we're going to do the press conference, and whatever happens, you've just got to say, I froze. And I may never forgive myself for this moment, but I've worked my whole life for it. But when it came down to it, yeah, okay. So I got up to the press conference, and media said, Aldy, what have you got to say for yourself about that performance? He said, well, I thought the ref jumped in early, honestly. I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, finished all the media, and I walked downstairs, and it was about 2:00 in the morning. And as I'm walking out down the corridor of the Manchester Arena backstage, David Hay is at the other end, and he's coming this way. And I'm like, oh no. Because I've just basically, the whole build-up, I've just told him he's overrated, he's this, he's that. I'm like, this is going to be so embarrassing. And as he come towards me, I walked past him, and he went, well done. I was like as if to say, you obviously knew all along, but you played the game tremendously well. And I was like, yeah, thinking, I thought you were going to get knocked spark out, to be honest with you. And then that night, I left the arena. I thought, well, listen, what a journey. Like, that was unbelievable. Like, within a couple of months, you've promoted the World Heavyweight Championship. And obviously you're a complete joke, but who's done that? And back to the poker, but it was great. Went into work on Monday, went to get a sandwich in a cafe. Literally, as I walked in, it was like, mate, where's my £16.95? You told me he was going to do it. What a joke. I was like, I don't need this. Anyway, went back to the office. And then that day, Tony Sims phoned me up, who's Darren Barker's trainer, who was about to fight for the World Middleweight Championship. Big ticket seller from London. He said, look, we saw you promote that fight, and, if you can do that for Aldy Harrison, God knows what you can do for Darren. Yeah. So would you be interested in signing him? I said that, Tony, honestly, it was a laugh and everything, but it's not for me. He's like, oh, what do you mean? It's like, you sold the fight. Like, Matchroom's got a good, reputation, a good name in boxing. All right, let me drive down to Hainault. So I drove down to the gym. Next thing, I'd signed Darren Barker. There was a prize fighter that weekend, which I went to. Next thing, Kell Brook's dad has sort of snuck next to me and said, listen, our contract's up with Frank Warren. Would you be interested in signing Kell Brook? And he was like probably the number one sort of prospect in the country at the time. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, he saw you, and I was like, wow. And then the next week, I got a phone call from Carl Froch, who was the number one fighter in Britain. And he said, look, my contract's up with Mick Hennessy. Would you? And now I'm there with Carl Froch, Kell Brook, and Mick and Darren Barker. And I'm like, still don't really know what I'm doing. But now by this stage, there was a little bit of momentum. And there were 4 promoters with Sky at the time. And it was Matchroom through Prize Fighter and just doing a couple of nothing shows. Kelly Maloney, who was then Frank Maloney, Frank Warren, and Ricky Hatton. And I went to Sky and I said, all those promoters hated each other, right? They were all trying to outdo it. It was the most ridiculous sort of mix of people who were on the same platform, yet everyone wanted everyone to fail. So I went to Sky and said, look, I'm going to build a stable, and I'm going to start bringing boxing back to big arenas. And you need to get rid of all these people and give me all the dates. And Sky said, look, we're friends with everyone. It's a nice, it's a nice little thing we got going on here. He gets 6 a year, he gets 4 a year, he gets 8 a year. I said, no, I'm going to show you. But just remember this conversation. So we went out. I did Kell Brook against Matthew Hatton, sold 9,000 at Sheffield Arena. That's right. The War of the Roses at the time. I did Carl Froch against Lucien Boutte, which was one of the great nights in when he beat him in front of 9,000. And the ratings were going through the roof. And all the contracts came up, and they got rid of everybody. and they gave me all the dates. And this was like over a period of like a year. And that was really that as a promoter, you're only really good as your broadcast deal and the money you're bringing in from the TV, because that's going to give you. But the mix that we had with Sky was perfect, and we went out and we, obviously led to the signing of Anthony Joshua and Tony Bellew and like James DeGale, George Groves. So we did Froch Groves at Wembley, was a real big sort of kickstart for that, and it's just been a whirlwind really. But that's where it came from, at a poker table in Las Vegas, and good old Audley Harrison.
The AJ Klitschko fight, obviously April 29th, 2017, the biggest fight in British boxing history. Talk to us about your emotions on that night and kind of AJ's ascent to sort of that superstardom status, given the fact that really it's 6 years after the trajectory of Matchroom's rise and obviously of Anthony Joshua as well.
I guess the naivety had gone a little bit by then. It had become a little bit more of a business, and you were all of a sudden playing high stakes, if you look at some of the early moments in my boxing promotional career, Audley Harrison, Darren Barker beating Daniel Gill, Kell Brook beating Sean Porter for the world title, and Carl Froch beating Lucien Boutte, you just see a kid really like running into the ring, and against Boutte I ran in too early, like the ref he crossed his hands, he called the fight off. But I jumped in, through the ropes, picked Carl Froch up, span him round, and then turned round and the ref was still counting. 8. Not so I dived out the ring. And back then it was fun. It was like, it wasn't really, I was never looking at the bottom line. I was never really looking at how much money we'd made. I've always made sure that we were going to be okay. But as the game got bigger, the stakes got bigger.
Yeah.
Fighters wanted more money. It became more of a business. They weren't fighting for free back then. But the money was the money, and the glory was the glory. But like any sport, as it becomes bigger, as there's, then all of a sudden there's more managers, there's advisors, there's lawyers, and you can sometimes lose that personableness of the industry. With Anthony, that still remained, because he's a close friend of mine. So that fight meant a lot, and that was probably the moment. Even though we'd done Froch Groves at Wembley, we'd done other stadium events. That was probably the moment where I thought, wow, actually globally, we've become a force. When I did the Audley Harrison fight, I was Audley Harrison's promoter. We were the B-side. I wasn't really promoting the fight. I was a co-promoter, but not really. But this was us, globally around the world, with a heavyweight icon in Vladimir Klitschko, with an Olympic gold medalist. And I don't really remember the night at all that well, because, it's quite trippy when you're in a stadium like that with 90,000 people and you're sort of looking around thinking, it's almost like, what is going on here, And I was very nervous for Anthony. It was like, is he actually that good? Is he good enough to beat a Vladimir Klitschko? And the emotions that night were incredible, because obviously knocks him down in the 5th round, then looks like he's going to get stopped himself in that round because he ran out of, he emptied the tank.
He nearly got finished at the end of the round, didn't he?
He gets dropped with a huge right hand. Gets up and then finds a way back into the fight and stops him in the 11th round. I remember just jumping off my seat so high that when I got into the ring after and we were celebrating, I took my phone out to take a picture and it had gone. It's like when you lose your phone. And it had gone, as I jumped up out of my seat, it had come out of my inside pocket and just sort of fallen on the floor. And one of the security guys was like, is this your phone? I was like, yeah. Because it's just the emotion of... And it was like, stay down, because he kept getting up, Klitschko. It was like, even the last knockdown, he got up and he was holding a rope like a Rocky movie right in front of me there. And I'm thinking, he's looking at me in the eyes like, I'm going, no. I just wanted to say to him, hey, stay, just relax. You've had too much. But he would get up. He was so brave. And, the atmosphere and the energy, that was.
How significant was that fight for the boom of British boxing? You've been on the front line of that. I mean, an AJ winning it, because if AJ had been finished in the 5th, does it change Matchroom's trajectory? Does it change?
Possibly. I mean, AJ changed boxing. I mean, we've done a great job to change boxing, but you need a role model, an ambassador, a face. And for the first time, you had a guy that transcended and sort of influenced all generations. So like kids, I could take him and he would go into schools. Kids knew who he was, grandparents knew who he was through gold in the Olympics. You know, he had the benefit of the BBC platform, the London Olympics, you know, winning gold. He spoke so well. He's like carved out of stone. He's a handsome man. He's got everything. And it was just perfect timing, really. And all these fighters today, globally, but definitely in Britain, owe a lot to Anthony Joshua, because without him, the sport wouldn't be where it is today. And he never really gets the credit. And the way that he's carried himself over the years has been amazing. No controversy, ever. You know, and just a very pure individual that, you know, as you saw after the Usyk fight, the pressure of that role has probably taken its toll on him as well. But that was a night where British sport, and when you say, people come up to me about that night and say, you know, I've been to Ryder Cups, I've been to Wimbledon finals, I've been to Champions Leagues, the greatest sporting event I've ever been to. You know, that's like, as a promoter, you don't really get any better feedback than that.
It was actually Sono on the way down, Eddie, and I know the time's ticking on, we won't keep you too much longer. Sono on the way down, we were in the lift, and she was like, we need to ask Eddie what sustains him. I mean, I would imagine your bank account's pretty good now already. Eddie, you've got 2 beautiful daughters, you're a family man, you've promoted the biggest fight in AJ Klitschko. And you started this interview by saying that you look at your Bob Orams, you look at your father, and you think, I don't want to get there, I don't want to be at that age, I don't want to be angry. What will see you leave boxing? What is the fight? Now, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it an AJ Tyson where you're going to get in the ring and forget the boxer announcing their retirement? You're going to say, guys, Eddie Hearn's out. Yeah. Have you thought about it? Have you got
I think it's more of a feeling than a fight, you know? I always said that the moment that you lose the passion for what you do in anything in life, you need to look at walking away. As a boxer, once you lose that passion and that fight, that is 100% the time to walk away, because it becomes dangerous. You know, when you're in a fight with another man, it's really, and you go into the trenches, it's who wants it most. And going back to things that he's taught me and things that he would say about a little bit of bread in a fish's mouth, another thing is, and this is a bit of me and a bit of him, is how bad do you want it? That's such an important phrase in everything. How bad do you want it? You know, how deep are you prepared to go for this and to win? And that's why I work like I do, because I'm desperate to win, desperate to outperform the competition, desperate to keep providing opportunities for my fighters. Now, when that hunger goes, again, you go back to the selling, you'll see it, you'll feel it. You know, I won't be able to deliver it in the same way. I might get away with it, but it'll fill you with a feeling of emptiness, because it's like, I just don't want to do this anymore. So that's the moment. And it could be after a fight, but you get situations like with the Conor Benn stuff. Of course, like every job that you're in, you have a bad week, and then you think to yourself, I don't even want to be in this job anymore. Yeah. I'm not really enjoying myself anymore. And then we come out here, we have a great week. Saturday could just be the most amazing show. And I go, I love boxing. You know, and I look at Bob Arum, as much as I say, what are you doing? I also admire the fact, because it must, the passion and the fire must still be
91,
burning, because he doesn't need the money. So it's just like, I don't want this to leave my life. And when you don't want it to leave your life, you don't let it leave your life. But at that moment where you go, my heart's not in it anymore, that's the time to walk away. You're
all about authenticity. That comes out. There's a passion for boxing, but I wonder, is there a sport that Eddie Hearn looks at and thinks, ooh, love to get my teeth into that, see opportunities? And that, you spoke to me last week about the great respect you have for Dana White and what he's done for MMA with the promotion of UFC. Is there a sport you look at and think, that could be in my future, because that needs a bit of a helping hand?
We get approaches all the time, and people look at what we've done for boxing. Darts is another great example.
My mum, by the way, thanks you for that. Thursday nights, Premier League darts.
Darts is huge. I mean, darts is as big for our business as boxing. Snooker, of course, what my dad's done for that over the years. And a lot of these sports get in contact with us, rugby league, and can you? But it's about ownership for us. Like, we need to stamp our brand on a sport, and we have to be passionate about the sport that we get involved with. So for us, we love boxing. So my dad loves darts. Snooker, he grew up playing, and so you have to have a love for the sport. And rugby league, we don't really feel any emotion for rugby league. So
two soft Southerners.
I think it's like more other areas. I mean, I look at music and I think, how different can that be? We're providing nights out feelings for consumers via events, music. You know, it's the same kind of experience. You know, it's a night out, it's an event. I love content. You know, I love creating content around what we do. Storytelling, documentaries, you know, make the days count, you know, our build-up shows to fights and stuff like that. And I think there's a huge space for that across the business. If you look at Drive to Survive, an amazing example of how shoulder programming has really driven a fan base into a sport that wasn't there before. I'm one of them.
Yeah.
Never even had any interest in Formula One. Watched Drive to Survive, we're in. And that drove viewership incredibly. So there's lots of areas to diversify in. But live sport and providing opportunities for athletes, it's kind of nothing better. Because I'm a failed athlete. You know, me and my dad always say this. For me, my number one choice as a kid was being a sportsman, but I was never good enough. This is the next greatest thing. You know, my dad always said to me, if you can get 1% of the adrenaline that a fighter gets when they walk to the ring, you're very lucky. Well, I feel like I get 40%, 50%, or maybe even 100%. So I'm so lucky to be. And when we go out there on Saturday, you know, and we see Bivol fighting Ramirez and young Zelfa Barrett from Manchester trying to become world champion, you know, McCaskill and Cameron going at it for all the belts in boxing. Like, it's that moment. It's like Katie Taylor last weekend. You know, with all the rubbish of the last couple of weeks, you spend some time around Katie Taylor, and I just think back to when she strolled in my office, and I'm looking at all these belts, and like there's the feeling of fulfillment, and live sport gives you that.
Just one more from me, Eddie, because I know we're running out of time, right? I mean, boxing, the greatest sport in the world, also the most frustrating in many ways. I mean, the fights that we want to see that don't get made, the judging decisions that go wrong, the failed drugs tests, all of these things. Does boxing ever achieve anything like its sort of perfect vision of kind of utopian?
Probably not. And I think that's almost like not the, you know, the attraction of boxing, but the frustration of boxing. I mean, we have to be careful, and we live in a world now where, especially with the YouTube market, I mean, I watch some of this YouTube boxing, and as a hardcore boxing fan, and I'm like, and I understand it, I've done it, you know, I've promoted those, and I've seen the numbers, but I'm like, guys, we got to be careful, because if we don't create the big fights and big moments, broadcasters will look at the numbers on YouTube boxing and go, well, this is actually outperforming the average stuff, so we should spend more money on YouTube boxing, which is a complete disaster. So we're all under pressure. You know, when you look now, you've got Gervonta Davis against Ryan Garcia, Errol Spence against Terence Crawford, AJ against Tyson Fury. You know, there's 3 examples of fights that could really just change the face of boxing quite quickly. Boxing goes like this. You know, you have a load of great fights, Pacquiao against Mayweather, and, you know, AJ against Klitschko, and Fury against Wilder, and then you have 6 months of fights not getting made and fans moaning again, and that's okay as long as we see another one. So we're all under pressure at the moment to provide for fight fans. And people sometimes think that, I mean, I get the blame for everything, which is fine, but we want big fights. Like, big fights make money, right? Big fights grow the sport. Big fights deliver for the broadcasters, sponsors, fans. So but we're also, where I'm so jealous of Dana and the UFC is, you sign a central contract and you fight who you told you're fighting.
Yeah.
So you've signed with me, you're fighting him on the 17th of December in Vegas. We'll see you there. And you go, all right. Well, in boxing, I go to him and say, right, I want you to fight him. Well, you have to speak to my advisor about that. In walks the advisor, no barriers to entry. He was working at a car dealership. He's now an advisor for a boxer, you know, telling you why this guy's worth 20 million. And I'm like, he's not. I know how many buys this does. I know what the gate receipts are. This is the value for the fight. Not what we think, you know. And it's like, so people don't see the frustration behind the scenes. We want, you know, Al Heyman, all these people, they want Crawford Spence, Oscar De La Hoya, PBC. They want Tank against Ryan Garcia, because it's going to make him a load of money. But it's the political situation with broadcasters, the people you deal with, the egos, the perception of value that actually isn't reality. And it's a really difficult job to try and thread it all together. But we keep on trying, and I'm sure, as always, we'll see that one again.
Listen, Eddie, we've taken an hour and 10 minutes of your time. I know you're a busy boy. You've come in on that flight overnight. It's an exciting week, and I want to just finish on November 5th. We've been promoting this fight for weeks now. Ticket sales are good and strong. Bivol Ramirez, we were talking about this in the car. As I get closer to this fight night, the more I'm excited about it. We had Dimitri in our midst on Saturday. Lovely fella, by the way. Proper top, Dimitri. So humble. These are two unbeaten fighters. This is a monster fight. You know, people say, oh, Canelo, AJ, big names in their own right, don't get me wrong, but as a first dipping your toe in the water for Abu Dhabi, it's monster on Saturday. It's going to be a cracker.
It's one of the fights of the year, and it's one of the cards of the year as well. But this is what I love about the fight and the show. You could come over here with a big fight, but this is the right fight night to introduce the market to boxing. You know, we're going to have over 10,000 in there on the night. The anticipation's really starting to build this week. This is just the start for big time boxing in Abu Dhabi. But again, going back to the product and what you're selling, you need to make sure that when you enter a market like this, you provide them a night where everybody in the Etihad on Saturday, everyone tuned in on DAZN or wherever they're watching it, goes, that was amazing. And when we come back in February or March with a bigger show, you sell the whole thing out, you know. But Bivol Ramirez is one of the best fights that we've made in boxing. 2 undefeated fighters, a pound-for-pound star, you know, a Mexican star, former world champion. Not just the undercard as well, but that fight alone, really important fight for boxing. And you can sit there as a promoter. It's a great feeling when the show starts and you go, you know, enjoy everyone, because I promise you will. Versus, I hope we get a couple of good ones here, because if it doesn't, yeah, exactly. So I'm there as a fan on Saturday. And that's when I know we've built a good one. When I'm actually going, I can't wait for Saturday. And I can't wait because it's the start of something very special.
It's going to be great. November 5th. Tickets still available. EtihadArena.ae. Eddie Hearn, always a pleasure, my man. Thank you so much for your time today.
Dubai Eye 103.8.
Join the conversation.